It's good to be up here another morning, and today I actually decided to break out the rifle, and today we're at 322 names of World War II veterans here, and I know a lot of you guys have been following me on Instagram on the journey at the rifle, and I'm so happy to be here and preserve more legacies. These guys are already obviously solidified in our history, but for our generation now to have this rifle and for me to go around the country to tell their story is just another aspect of that. So today's topic was the European theater during World War II, and I'm up here with three magnificent men, and we say that all the time, but each of these men's story is fantastic. And the first gentleman I'm going to talk to on the far right is a P-47 fighter pilot. Maybe you guys got to hear him talk the other day, but his name's Ed Cottrell, and he's approaching his 102nd birthday soon. And Ed, you and I have been back to Belgium where we located a couple of crash sites of your roommates.
Right.
Ed lost two roommates during the Battle of the Bulge who crashed. And German tractors doing farming have been digging up pieces of their planes over the last 30 years. And you and I went to Belgium, and one of the German farmers and historians gave you a compass that belonged to your roommate, Ted Smith. How did that feel, having a piece of his plane?
When I was able to go to the crash site, I didn't know at the time that we were going to visit the crash site of Ted. And these three gentlemen came up and said that we want to give you something. And they gave me this little piece of compass from Ted's airplane. And I said, how do you know this is Ted's airplane? And they looked, and there's a serial number on that little piece of compass, and that is exactly the serial number that Ted's plane was when he got hit by flak and crashed on January the 1st in 45. To me, that was the link that brought me back to the loss of one of my very, very good friends that I was not on the flight when he got hit, but when I heard of his crash, it was pretty devastating, and so I was very happy to get that compass.
Yeah. It's magnificent, you know, while the Germans at the time were our enemy, the amount of record keeping and documenting they did on the crash sites of Allied service members is pretty detailed, sometimes even better than the United States. For the birthday boy here, it's not very often we have an ex-prisoner of war. And while serving with the 82nd Airborne, Mr. Langrier was wounded and captured during D-Day, during Holland.
29th
of June.
Yeah.
Okay, so during the Normandy campaign.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your story leading up to that and being captured?
Yes. You don't want it too long, though.
We got 40 minutes on the clock.
Okay.
But we still have Papa Jake here too. So,
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think a lot of these men and women have ever heard from an ex-prisoner of war.
Well, I can tell you more about coming over France, coming over Cherbourg. Our plane took a lot of flak, and it killed one man and next to me and another one on the other side. And we couldn't get out of that plane fast enough. And I jumped in Normandy, and I landed in the greenhouse right next to the church, St. Mary's. And time I got out of my shooting that, I was carrying so much equipment besides my Thompson submachine gun and a 45 and 10 pounds of CS explosive. And I had more weight around my body probably than I weighed at the time. So I had to cut loose most of that stuff in there. And I was lucky I didn't get cut up going through the glass in this greenhouse. But then we fought our way through the church yard and could see what was going on over there. St. John's steel hanging on the steeple. And Johnson was shot, and he was laying in corner of the building. But he
And who was Johnson to you?
was a sergeant.
A sergeant in your
Yeah.
platoon?
Yeah, right. And my job was to go down, and if we couldn't hold the bridge at St. Mary Cleese, then I was to blow it. Well, we did hold the bridge, so I didn't have to do that. But it was a lot of fighting, close fighting through the hedgerows. Kind of bad, really. A lot of hand-to-hand fighting with knives and bayonets and yeah. So after fighting through the hedgerows, I got to just where the jump-off was going to be, where Patton was going to be, and I was wounded on a German counterattack and taken prisoner, and I went to Stalag 12A, which was a assignment camp where they brought prisoners in. But first I went to the hospital in France. I got a little bit ahead of myself. And I was there for about a month healing, and then they put us in cattle cars. And
So the Germans actually took care of your injuries at first.
pardon me?
The Germans took care of your injuries at first.
Oh, yes, they did. But it was French doctors and that there that were very good. And one German surgeon was very nice, too. Wondered why we was fighting. You got to be fighting with the Germans so we can fight the Russians. But yeah, nevertheless,
At Stalag 12B, you said? Stalag 12B?
12A.
12A.
Yeah.
How was the food situation there in the prisoner of war camp?
Well, it wasn't very good. I was sent off to a mine, and it was a coal mine, and it worked about a quarter of a mile under the ground, and it was run by the SS. And when we got down into the mine, the German told me to. The German guard says, "You got to work." I said, "No, I'm not working." I said, "That's against the Geneva Convention." And I didn't no sooner get those words out of my mouth, and he took a rifle and worked me over a little bit. And so I couldn't do anything after that anyway. So the next day, it was the same thing all over, and I told him the same thing. And again, he worked me over. And when he left, the old Czech miner that was in there with me said, "If you don't work, they'll kill you." So I figured that's about what is going to happen. So I did a foolish thing. They had little carts that hold, I don't know how much coal, but they were on little tracks, and you filled the cart, and then they pushed it out in the center of the tunnel, and then they took it up to the tipple and dumped it down. Well, I started putting rocks in there, and it was a short time after that went up there that the guard come back to me and says, "You sabotaged this coal." He said, "You put rocks in there." I said, "Well, I guess I did. I thought it was coal." Boy, and then he worked me over again. So
Jeez.
I figured after that, if I was going to live, I was going to have to work. So, and the object of this camp was to work people to death. The food was very, very meager. A little bit of sugar beet soup, and a little bit of bread, a piece about that big, about 2 by 2, and a brown bread. 20% sawdust they used in it, and so it tastes like sawdust too. So I decided, there was another friend of mine there. Well, he wasn't a friend at the time, but we got together on a march and saying, well, if we don't escape, why, we'll probably die in these mines. So Well, I said, you know what the penalty is? When we were there was a couple of white Russians that had escaped, and they brought them back and stood them against the wall, shot them, and then put them in a wooden box, and then everybody had to walk by
Wow.
those boxes. And the German commander said, now that's what's going to happen to anyone that tries to escape. No one escapes from here. So, well, we thought, well, we got to do something one way where we know die. We get weaker and weaker, we'll probably die in these mines. So he said too, well, we got to figure out some way of getting by. So we, on a cold, miserable day, was walking back to our quarters, which was barracks, which was probably about 1.5 miles away from the coal mine. We had hit an area where there was a lot of brush and trees and stuff. So my friend said to me, let's go. So we slipped out of the line, and I can remember somebody saying, good luck, you know. And we went as far as we didn't know the area at all because we never got out to see anything. We ran into this big barn, and this Volkstrom, which is one of the Germans that had been hurt in the service and couldn't no longer serve in the army, but he was like a policeman, and he carried his weapon. And we was just getting out and getting close to the barn, and this German hollered, halt. And of course we knew what would happen if they caught us, so we headed for the barn. He shot at us a couple of times but missed us. And as we got into the barn, the doors opened outward and they had two arms like this. Well, I happened to walk behind the barn, the door, and there was like a 2x4 that they put down these cleats here to lock this door. Well, when he came in, he immediately shot my friend because there was no place to hide there. And he was in the middle of the room, and he shot him and killed him. And I took the 2x4 and hit him across the face and killed him. And I took his weapon and his ammunition in that and left. And by the way, I still have that gun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. How much do you want for it?
It's probably around 40,000.
Probably is.
Yeah.
And there's people probably here that pay that for
Yeah.
sure.
And
I want to hold that thought because I want to get more into your liberation, but I'm going to
Yeah.
let Papa Jake.
I took his belt and holster and the gun and about 3 clips of ammunition. And I took off because I know somebody who heard the shot.
Hold that thought. I want to get back into that. I'm going to have Papa Jake start telling a little bit of his story, and then I want to
Okay.
talk about how the war ended for all three of you. Jake, can you give us an introduction about who you are and your participation in the European campaign?
I was a soldier in the service. I started off in 1938 at age 15. My cousin and I were both 15 years old. We had no money. We were going to high school. And I had to work my way through high school for my room and board. And I remember being downtown in the old town of Minnesota on a Saturday, and we were walking around. We had no money. And the Roxy Theater said, today, matinee, Gene Autry, America's favorite cowboy. 10 cents. He says, Jake, the armory is right across the park. Let's go over there and join the National Guard. I said, Chick, we're 15. You have to be 18 to join the National Guard. He said, They're advertising to fill the unit. Just when Hitler took it to Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, and just the next, Austria. So I said, well, they won't take us in. He says, what can they do? Kick us out if we can't get in? So we walked over there, and this huge captain, Hugh H. Soper, I still remember his name, looked up at us and said, what can I do for you young men? Wow, that's an experience right there. I said, we'd like to join the National Guard, sir. And Chick had told me, when they say, how old are you? Make sure you look them right in the eye and say, 18, sir. And I'm thinking, 18, 18, 18. And he looks up at me and he says, what year were you born? Wait a minute, man. And I'm pretty good at math. And I thought, oh, I was born in 1922. Take away 3. That's 1919. I said, 1919, sir. He says, sign right here. That's all we had to do is sign once we told him we were 19. We were born in 1919. This was 1938. We joined the National Guard and went to drill every Monday night for 2 hours. And we got paid every 3 months a $12 check. It was like money from heaven when you don't have a penny. But there, all these men who joined the National Guard were put into federal service in February 1941. So down to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana we went, and we went on the Louisiana maneuvers and got back in June. And I found out that I was transferred to headquarters company as the company clerk because I could type. Japanese hit Pearl Harbor. Wow. The colonel came down, colonel of the 135th Infantry Regiment, came down and said, you clerks go back and tell your commanding officers that I'm offering a 15-day furlough to Minnesota for all those who haven't had a leave or a furlough in the past year. So I went back and told Captain Erickson exactly what that was, and he says, Corporal, you go back up there and check the records and find out who hasn't had a furlough in the past year, and you give them a 7-day furlough. I said, 7 days? I said, we're 1,000 miles south of Minnesota. This is midwinter. And I said, they'll get back there and have to turn around and come back. He says, Corporal, I'm the commanding officer of this unit. You do as you're told. I said, yes, sir. Saluted him and went up and checked the records and found out there were about 54 guys that hadn't had a furlough in the past year, and Corporal Jake Larson was one of them. Somehow that typewriter made a mistake and it put down 15 days for Corporal Larson. When I got back from that furlough, I became an instant private. And I was told, you're going to be transferred to the wire section. You'll be climbing poles and stringing wire from now on. I said, thank you, sir. He said, and I should have court-martialed you. I says, I'd like to know the reason you could court-martial me. You signed every one of those personally. He said, well, anyway, you're going to be climbing poles, stringing wire. And the next thing I knew, the whole division was moved from Louisiana to my God, New Jersey. And we were waiting for transport overseas. So we got the transport came in, and there were 50 of ships that was in the group in the convoy, and I volunteered for working in the kitchen, and my goodness, my meals were quite different from anybody else's. I was steak, bacon and eggs and stuff. Some of that stuff they were eating, I don't know.
Jake, I want them to hear a little bit of your story in France as I'm watching the clock dwindle down. What was your role during France and in Normandy?
Well, I was in the infantry there. When I got to North Ireland, where we were headed, I was transferred into G3 of 5th Corps. Anybody know what a corps is? There's 2 corps in an army. I became part of an army. I was 5th Corps. G3, I said, what is G3? G3 is plans and training. There's 4 G's. G1 is personnel. G2, intelligence. G3, plans and training. G4, supplies. We trained 2 divisions under us. We had 2 divisions under us. And when we got overseas, we got the 1st and the 29th Division. I became an operations sergeant. I worked on the plans and training. I worked on the whole operation. I got the Bronze Star for my work on the invasion.
Great.
And when we landed, I was on the ship where Eisenhower and Bradley, my full bird colonel, and all the generals for the divisions and stuff. I rode over to Omaha Beach on that ship, and when I got off the ship, I went in with members of the 16th Infantry Regiment from the 1st Division. So we had to walk in with the water up to our chins and holding the rifle above, and we walked in a single file, following the one guy in back. That beach that we walked in on was mined. Over 1 million mines, and I hear when I tell this story, I found out it probably was closer to 2 million mines, and others were walking in from their boat at the same time, and they were all walking in single file. If you glanced over there and saw a spurt of water come up, that meant somebody stepped on a landmine. I was more terrified of that than I was the small arms that were fire that we were under all the way. I broke off I was on easy red. That was the killing part. And I had two MG-42 machine guns shoot at me from opposite ends of the cliff. And I got pinned down behind a little sand burr there. That sand burr, 6 to 7 inches high, was my lifesaver. And I dug out a cigarette from my wrapped up package that wouldn't get wet and put it in my mouth. And Uncle Sam saved a lot of guys' lives by giving them a cigarette or something to do, see. We didn't smoke before we got into the service, and they gave you cigarettes. So, no match. I felt the presence of someone to my left and behind, and I said, "Hey, buddy, have you got a match?" I got no response. So I glanced back, and there was a helmet beside it, in front of a guy, and there was no head under the helmet. At that exact moment, it was like the soul of that man said, "Get up and run to the cliffs right now." So I got up and ran, and it was like magic. The firing stopped, and I got up, and then it started again. They must have had changed barrels or added more ammunition or something. But anyway, I made it to the cliff without a scratch.
Papa Jake, I'm going to hold you right there, and we'll get back to that story on Omaha Beach. It's unbelievable what you went through, and thank you for sharing that. War isn't pretty, guys and girls, obviously, and to have these men with us and their footsteps, something like on Omaha Beach, is just once in a lifetime. You may never hear that story from his mouth again. So, thank you. Ed, quickly, where were you as a pilot when the war had ended?
I was in Nuremberg. We had left St. Tron in March in Belgium and followed the 9th Army all the way down through Germany until we reached Nuremberg. And we all knew that the war was just about over. The word came down from headquarters that when the war ended, the 48th Fighter Group was going to go to Japan, and any pilot that had 65 missions could either go to Japan or go home. And at that time, I had 64 missions. And the commanding officer, 2 days before the war ended, said, I want you to do a reconnaissance flight for me. There's some German aircraft that's supposed to have surrendered, but we didn't find them, so I want you to reconnaissance over the airfield, see if they're there so you get your 65th mission.
That's awesome.
So that's how I got home from
That's a
the
good
end
boss.
of the war.
Wow.
Thanks to my commanding officer.
And you were telling me by the end of the war, you weren't always at one particular base. Sometimes as you guys pushed through Germany, you would just put a quick landing strip down.
Right.
And live off that landing strip nearby, and that's pretty, that's some, I think a lot of things people don't hear of pilots during an advancement of war.
Well, when you're used to flying off and landing on 10,000-foot runways that are concrete, and then suddenly you start moving up, following the 9th Army, and they put down metal strips that are anywhere from 4,500 to 5,000 foot, and you try to take a P-47 to take off or land in that short a time, it's pretty scary. And so the one thing that saved us, on the metal strips, there was mud and water all come up through those strips when your plane started to go down the runway. As we moved through through Germany, we never lived in any one particular area. Wherever we could find housing or wherever we could follow the cooks, that's what we did. Sometimes we slept by our planes, sometimes we slept in abandoned houses. We had no permanent place to live. We just kept moving forward.
And we actually found one of those landing strips in the woods by one of his bases. So this December, I'm going to go out there with a blowtorch and cut a piece of it and take it home as a souvenir. Before I had to hold you on your story, we were just getting into your liberation, or how you were eventually freed as a prisoner. If you want to continue to tell us how that happened.
Yes, well, I think I explained to you the first part of it, being in the barn and this some man shooting my friend, and I went a short distance and I could hear dogs barking, and they got, Germans always use shepherd dogs to track people down, and I thought, oh boy, got the dogs. Well, I was fortunate enough to be next to a stream, and it was probably maybe 15, 20 feet wide, and at the deepest part, maybe about 3 feet. And I took to the water, and I walked for quite a few miles in that, and because the water was very, very cold. It was in the spring, and the snow melt and that, So
Would you say this was March time frame, April?
At that time, there was such a loss of time. Every day ran into kind of another day. So I wanted to get to the American lines, so I traveled at night when there wasn't too much traffic, but there was always traffic on the road, people moving around. And I could find my way because we was taught to work by the stars. And I knew what direction west was, so I took off in the western direction. And first night I spent in a cemetery. Had I gotten out of the water, this cemetery was just a short distance across the road from where I got out of the water. And I kind of hunkered down behind one of the tombstones there. And after daylight, I could see better what was going on. And there was quite a bit of traffic on the road, so I felt I better not get too close to the roads during the day. So I always made sure I was at least maybe 150, 200 feet away from the road and in concealment during the day. And at night, I had to go out, and I had no water, and I had the first night in the cemetery, there had been, where that tombstone I was sitting behind had water in the vase, and I was so thirsty, I drank the water out of the flowers. And the next day, or the next night, I was down on the road, walking the road, and I waylaid a German soldier and took his food that he had in a knapsack, usually some sausage or cheese and bread and that. So not a whole lot, but anyway, it sustained life. And from there on, I was walking pretty much at night. And I did come upon a little building on the outskirts of the village. And by the time second day, third day, I was getting pretty hungry again, and so I thought, well, at this time of the night, probably nobody there. So I went into the building, and there were two Volkstroms. Evidently was a headquarters for the Volkstrom in that little village. So there was two of them in there, and I shot them and killed them, and got a little bit of bread and that, and then took off down the road again.
Can I at least get one of their pistols?
Yeah.
Can I have one of them? Now you have 3 pistols.
No. It's the same pistol.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went next day, I was down the road too, and I waylaid another German soldier.
So who found you eventually, or did you get back to friendly lines?
Yes. After about, I'm guessing around 2 weeks back at the lines, I come upon, well, first of all, the Germans were coming down the road one night pretty fast, and I could see lights and headlights, and I could hear the clanking of tanks and trucks and that. So, there was a German convoy coming down. They were retreating from someplace. And as they were coming down the road at daybreak, a Piper Cub plane spotted them, and a spotter plane for the artillery, and they fired on that column and just decimated the column.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really a mess. And after that was all done, I thought, well, I better stay where I'm at because I don't know what's going to happen. This will pass pretty soon. Well, first came the civilians, and then came the tanks and trucks and that loaded with soldiers, and then comes the foot soldiers. They're all going down the road. And then after they had been fired on, I thought, well, I better wait. Evidently our troops are not too far behind. So I kind of hunkered down in there and waited until I could see that we had our tanks and that coming down the road. And they came in, and after they had passed, I didn't want to get out and get shot because some of the guys were getting pretty trigger happy, at that time. And so
Eventually you went to one of those Americans coming.
Yep, and after they had passed quite a little ways, I got out, and there was a guy in a radio in his Jeep. He was standing there talking on the radio. So I walked up to him and tapped him on the shoulders, and he almost passed out.